First, let me thanks the organizer for the invitation. I'm the only, probably one of the speakers from China, and the only one probably non-ethnic Indians to be here. So I'm asked to talk about how China has advanced to a current stage in science, technology, innovation. Try to look at how, the government policy, the efforts of the scientific community, and also the societal kind of endeavor have put China on the map of global science, technology, innovation. Before I proceed, I just wonder whether from the audience, whether you know any particular things about these four Asian Chinese inventions. Probably you have learned something from your high school kind of history classes, or maybe you have read some stuff. Could you please raise your hand? How many of you actually know about these four Asian Chinese inventions? So, okay. If you don't know, so let me just very briefly to go through these four things. Actually, these things are still, closely related to our daily life. These four things, these four inventions actually include the compass, include gunpowder, include paper making, and also include printing. If we think of the connections between compass and the GPS system, so sort of basically it really helps at the very beginning, help people to navigate through different kind of directions, right? If we think of the gunpowder, basically, if we are still engaged war, basically we have to use those kind of technology, right? As for the last two things, paper making and printing, although we are in the internet age, a lot of things actually can be communicated by using mobile stuff and read stuff over the internet, but this kind of paper communication still is one of the ways to disseminate the knowledge, disseminate information, etc. For example, this time when I came to India, I have to apply for a visa. So where I still was advised by the immigration offices, basically say you have to print your visa out, otherwise you will have trouble getting into the country, right? That basically means these kind of paper printing and paper making and printing still occupy an important role, an important position in the society. Okay, for those of you who are familiar with what happened in China in the last maybe 20, 30 years, basically, you probably know these kind of four kind of recent innovations. I call it innovation, but I don't want to call them kind of invention, because these are the things actually were invented in other countries, but Chinese innovators try to adopt it or try to adjust it, those kind of inventions in the Chinese context, and make them more acceptable to the Chinese population and acceptable to the Chinese situation. You have this fast speed train. You have this kind of online payments. You have the online kind of shopping system, and also the last but not least, you have something called a kind of mobile kind of bicycle sharing kind of thing. If we really take a look at what happened in China in the last, not 20 years, but maybe last 40 years, basically China has become a world kind of manufacturing center, and also in terms of manufacturing kind of sophistication, in terms of technology, in terms of other aspects, basically this kind of level has been also on the rise. China also has rely on or dependent on foreign direct investment, especially those kind of high-end technology innovation embedded in those kind of FDIs, and including those kind of multinational companies who not only enter the Chinese market for selling their products, but also try to engage Chinese talent, try to make some of the Chinese multinational R&D centers located in China being part of their global network, innovation network. So, behind that, basically we have seen also over the years, the society as a whole in China has increased its investment into research and development, into science and technology. In 2018, basically, we know China spent about 2 trillion RMB, or equivalent of 300 billion US dollars as a whole, society as a whole, on R&D, which is the second in the world after the United States. United States in 2015, 2016, they basically spent about 415 billion US dollars. On the long term, probably China is going to continue to spend more money on research development. Maybe even at one day will replace the United States as the largest R&D spender in the world. In terms of the R&D intensity, or the percentage of the GDP actually spent on R&D, China's R&D intensity reached about 2.18%, which is over the average number of the European Union, so which only manage R&D intensity at about 2%. Also, you have a very, very large talent pool in China. That also has something to do with the dramatic expansion of higher education in China in the last 20-some years. Right now, the Chinese university annually graduate about 8 million undergraduate students, about 600,000 postgraduate students, including 60,000 PhD students. Actually, this has very significantly enhanced China's human resources in science and technology. By and large, over 100 million Chinese citizens right now have received higher education. So in terms of those people engaged research and development activities, China has about 6 million R&D kind of researchers. In the meantime, over the years, also China has seen increased number of Chinese actually going abroad to study, and quite a significant number of them actually over the years have returning to China. In the last couple of years, there were about 360,000 Chinese students study in the United States alone. So the total number of Chinese students going abroad in the last couple of years is over 600,000. You also had about 500,000 people, up to 500,000 of the Chinese actually return on an annual basis. Right? These returnees actually have helped advance scientific research and entrepreneurial activities in China. These people actually are staff R&D centers in China, staff universities and the research institute, and being entrepreneurs at various kind of multinational companies, Chinese companies, joint ventures, etc. And also these Chinese returnees also still maintained very close relations with the place they used to study or they used to work. If we take a look at in the last several years, basically those returnees from all over the world to China actually contribute a very, very significant percent of China's international collaborated papers, right? So these people are not only help China to become a scientific power, but also they maintain the close relationship with foreign international scientists to learn from them and to collaborate with them and to produce meaningful kind of knowledge, which is basically shared not only by Chinese, but also by the people all over the world. Okay. There are some other issues, right? So related, because of China has a lot of money to invest into research development. China has a large talent pool, and also, obviously, you will see some sort of outcome. These kind of outcome represented by the large number of Chinese publications in leading international journals, and then citations to these kind of journals, to these Chinese authored papers also has been on the rise, both in terms of quantity, in terms of total number of Chinese scientists published annually in the world. Basically, China ranks number 2 in the world, behind the United States. And in terms of citation to these papers, China also ranked number 2 in the world. There are two other kind of things. Basically, one is the Chinese society has become more kind of modern and more technological, sophisticated, and also China possesses a large number of very, very sophisticated, very advanced kind of R&D facilities where the first class work can only be carried out in some of the Chinese research labs instead of some other places. Okay. Let's take a look at what actually behind the rise of China as a kind of innovation kind of nation, and also on its way to become a global scientific power. There are at least several reasons behind that. But basically, we can say China has witnessed and kind of very evolution of its kind of innovation strategy. Early on, the consensus in China was that you really need to engage scientific research, and the rest will be coming. But later on, the Chinese scientific leadership understand that's not going to be the case, right? If you really want to become innovation-oriented state, innovation-oriented nation, you really need help not only from scientists but also from other aspects of society. You really need to try to translate the work conducted at the lab into a commercialized, profitable kind of products. You need help of entrepreneurs. You really need the help of legal kind of aspect if you really want to kind of strengthening your intellectual property rights protection regime. And you really need the help from other type of professionals to help drive your innovation. And later on, the government actually has come up with various kind of strategy, various kind of policies. One is called rejuvenation the nation with science, technology, and innovation. So they put the role of science, technology, innovation on very high on the agenda of the government. The government also realized the importance of talent. Right, so that's the reason why over the last 20 years we start to see the expansion of higher education, etc. Also, the importance of intellectual property right protection also has been recognized by and large. These things actually accumulated to the formulation of a medium and long-term plan. A 15-year medium long-term plan for the development of science technology between 2006 and 2020. Okay, so the plan is going to be ended by the end of this year. So right now, the Chinese government is formulating a forthcoming kind of 5-year kind of plan. Try to have some sort of roadmap for China to really become a leading scientific power in the world. I mean, within this kind of 15-year plan, you basically have like 3 5-year plans. So for 15-year plan, you have kind of rough kind of roadmap, and for every 5-year plan, you have a very detailed kind of implemental kind of ideas. So this kind of plan actually, to a certain extent, has been working. But of course, there are areas where the government really needs to pay some sort of attention to and try to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of these kind of plan mechanisms. So because there are still kind of limitations in terms of plan, especially in the aspect of scientific research. The last but not least, the government comes up with something called innovation-driven development strategy, putting innovation ahead of other kind of goals for the state to achieve in the next 15, 20 years. Okay. But Chinese economy, as you probably know, has been slowing down in the last couple of years, right? At one time, China's GDP growth reached about 10% per annum for a very sustainable period of time. Now, in the last year, in 2019, the GDP growth slowed down to about 6% per annum, right? So, of course, that will have significant impact on the investment of the government and the society as a whole into education and into research development, and into the knowledge innovation, knowledge and innovation kind of sectors, right? That will have a very significant kind of aspect. But at the same time, the slowing economic growth does not necessarily mean stagnation, right? But really, China wants to achieve the more sustainable economic growth, right? So. Other than the sustainable economic growth, we really have to include some sort of inclusive kind of development. You have to achieve some harmony in the economic growth. Try to solve the problem of inequality, and then try to reduce the gap between haves and have-nots in the society. At the same time, China really has facing a challenge of how actually China is going to overcome something called the middle kind of income trap, because according to the World Bank study in the last 20, 30 years, there are about 20 countries which reach the middle income kind of threshold, but not every country, every region has been successfully overcome this kind of middle income trap. China is reaching this kind of threshold by having a per capita GDP of 10,000 US dollar. Whether China can cross this kind of gap, become a really kind of high income kind of country is still kind of uncertain. So that actually means there's another thing actually I also want to mention is that by and large, international kind of environment start to become unfriendly to China versus what happened in the early 1990s and early 21st centuries. You basically, at one time, China was going to be constrained by some sort of international force, but I mean, luckily enough, the wind of international the direction of the wind actually changed because of unexpected kind of events globally. So, which actually have helped China to reach its current status in the world. So, what's going to happen after China has sustained almost like 20, 30 years of sustainable economic growth? What's going to happen under this kind of international environment? How China is going to react to that? How China is going to improve its kind of internal situation, etc., is still remains to be seen. So all these things actually called China really has to improve, transform its economic development model from labor-intensive, investment-intensive, energy-intensive, and resources-intensive into sustainable development, which is going to increasingly depend upon technology and innovation. So all these actually pose some sort of new challenges for China's science, technology, and innovation system. So I stop here, and thank you very much for your listening. I have some sort of questions.
Thank you. So we can take questions now.
Hello. Actually, I wanted to ask that internet is strictly censored in China, so the free flow of information is restricted. So how the latest development in science and technology can be accessed by Chinese researchers or publications, and how does China accepts dissent and criticism of its innovations?
Okay, I think these are excellent questions. So, I mean, information access basically is very important for innovator and for a country which aims to be an innovation-oriented country, right? So right now, I mean, we really have some sort of difficulties getting access to information. Even at my university, which is kind of joint venture university between UK-based university and a Chinese entity. So from time to time, we still got a cut of those kind of internet access to some of the sites in China. This is really a big issue for scientists, especially for those people who are engaged in social science research, right? So from time to time, and the scholarly community actually has raised the issue to the central leadership, but it's right now the situation is still unsettled. But we really don't know what's going to happen in the years to come. Whether the government is going to lose the control, lose these kind of restrictions. We have to wait and see. By and large, I really recognize the importance of information access to innovation, but we really have to work within the system and try to help the system to improve a little bit. We all understand. I mean, innovation really is not a philosophical kind of question. We really have to have various issues related to innovation to be resolved as soon as possible. Thank you.
Sir, I want to know your views on that Beijing and New Delhi has been increasing in pollution and different sort of sustainable development is, yes, there is a development in both the cities, but sustainably both of them are just poor. But it has been seen that there has been increment in sustainable development in Beijing.
Okay.
So how do you see that India can see toward future sustainable development as China is increasing further?
Okay. Another very excellent question, actually. I mean, if you look at what happened in China, let's say 20 years ago, many Chinese cities actually were highly polluted cities, right? Ranking top polluted cities in the world, because at the times China basically depend coal. About 70% of the energy mix actually comes from coal. Right now, the percentage of coal used in energy generation reduced to about 60%, 55 to 60%. At the same time, the Chinese government and the Chinese companies actually have invested very heavily in these kind of renewable energies. You probably know China is the leading countries in the world in terms of using renewable energy, including the solar and the wind power industry, right? And the Chinese government actually also committed to reduce its kind of coal intensity in the years to come, to try to cap this kind of greenhouse gas emission in 2030. And China also has become one of the important players actually sign of this most recent Paris Agreement. Of course, when the economic growth slowing down, whether China is going to reverse its course, right? Whether it's going to stimulate its economic growth by developing some of the industries which is carbon intensive and energy intensive, especially in this kind of building blocks industry like glass, like cement, like steels. We still have to look at it. But at the same time, you really have to understand in China, when its economic growth actually reached a certain point, Chinese citizens actually, their awareness of the environment goodness actually has been also on the rise. So basically it means when the country reaches a certain kind of threshold for its economic development, it is not only affordable for a country to tackle the issue of pollution, but at the same time, so actually you have this kind of domestic resistance force actually try to call for the government to take actions, right? Otherwise, I mean, it's not going to be sustainable, and also it's not going to the society is not going to harmonious. So I think for India, actually, I think maybe a couple of things you really have to do. Try to reduce the dependence on coal, right? And secondly, you really have to depend on the level of economic development. Try to see whether you can gradually phase out of the use of these kind of energy, kind of intensive kind of sectors. So, I mean, you really have to balance the economic development versus kind of environment protection. Of course, you may know this kind of inverse U-shape of this environmental Kuznets curve. I mean, maybe that is still kind of working to a certain extent. To some of the developed countries, maybe also to developing countries like China and India. Thank you.
Hello, sir. There is a lot of similarities in the Japanese and the Chinese culture, in the sense their language and a lot of different cultures. And Japan is also advanced in technology. So, is there any share of information in China and Japan, or it is completely kept different, that is cultural and technical?
I really don't know how to answer your questions. I mean, historically, you see the influence of the Chinese culture to some of the East Asia countries, right? You mentioned about Japan, maybe also in countries like Korea, etc., right? But at the same time, these countries, I mean, for a period of time, their economy, their level of technology innovation actually were far ahead of China. So during this period of time, really China become a catch-up. China really has spent a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of kind of resources trying to learn from these kind of developed countries, developed regions, right? So I think this kind of mutual learning is very, very important for Chinese, for Japanese, for Koreans, and for some other peoples. If your country really want to become important kind of player in the international stage, you really have to learn from each other. Each country has its advantages and its also its disadvantages. Kind of mutual learning is very, very important. You really have to pay real attention to the other part, regardless of the economic development level or the cultural kind of differences, etc. Thank you.
So, as you mentioned about the higher number of returnees to China, right? The ones who go are returning. The percentage is increasing. So, why do they return? Like, why? What is the reason for their return? Because we see in other countries it's not happening.
Okay. Okay, this is another excellent questions. I mean, basically people are very rational, right? So, one of the first reason probably, I mean, right? You can say you try to be patriotic, but one of the most important reasons is that you have these kind of opportunities available for this kind of returnees to tap into, right? Economic opportunities, etc. Right. Secondly, I mean, over the time, you see basically, as I mentioned, the government actually has maintained these kind of very kind of strategy, right? Try to stimulate the development of science, technology, innovation, right? You see the role played by government. You see the role played by Chinese companies, multinational companies, etc. Right? You have this kind of very consistent kind of government policy. Thirdly, when these kind of the improvement of the economic conditions, you also see these kind of infrastructure, the availability of infrastructure, right? So, and the lab, facilities, etc. If you go to the leading labs in China, basically you can see, in terms of facilities, they are at least a par with advanced countries in the world. If not, they are probably some of the labs actually possess much better kind of equipment. So that actually one of the reasons for them to come back. They can work at least a similar kind of environment as they would had overseas, right? So these are basically the kind of three kind of major reasons: economic opportunities, sustainable government policy, and also the kind of more mature, more sophisticated kind of facilities, infrastructure. Basically, these are the reasons that you have attract back of these returns. Oh, but the last but not least, there's something to do with government policies. Reach out to these kind of returns, ask them to come back. Of course, there are rooms for improvement. The Chinese government is learning from the India government in terms of issuing those kind of permanent residence to those kind of ethnic Chinese who used to be overseas, now holding a foreign passport. These are the things that the Chinese try to learn from in countries like India.
Thank you, Mr. Kong, for coming and talking to us. There are two questions I have. One, you spoke about the increased investments in science technological research in China. But as we all know, there is organic relationship between investments any country do in its basic education. So I would be grateful if you could throw some light on how Chinese government went about improving quality of education at elementary and secondary level.
Okay.
So that is one. And second question, how much of the progress in science and technology you would relate to centralized and more authoritarian political regimes in the country vis-a-vis the more democratic societies?
Okay. Another kind of very excellent question. So, okay. I mean, China actually has learned from other countries in terms of raising the quality of its higher education. You probably know, I mean, that higher education in China has become, has transformed from an elite type of education to one which is more mass-oriented education. Basically, I mean, in country as a whole, about 50% of high school graduates can get into universities, colleges to receive higher education, right? There are several ways the Chinese government try to maintain the quality or to raise the quality at some of the Chinese universities. You have various kind of schemes available for the promotion of some of the Chinese universities to become world class, right? Special kind of funds, special kind of schemes actually are available for these universities to, on one hand, try to attract returnees, right? Attract high quality, not only returnees, but also foreign scientists, foreign scholars. Right? Secondly, try to put money into these kind of infrastructures, right? For you to carry out those kind of research, you need the labs, you need a lot of money to do those things, right? I mean, maybe 20, 30 years ago, I mean, China was not affordable to do those things, but in the last 10, 20 years, especially in the last 20 years, it becomes kind of possible for China to do those kind of things. Certainly, actually, Chinese universities actually actively participate in these kind of international kind of competition, try to have their positions in this kind of international league table to be raised, right? In addition to the support from the government, central government and local government, and the university themselves actually also raise money from their alumni, right? To invest in particular areas the universities see the potential to become excellent in certain areas, right? And also, I mean, the Chinese students actually, many Chinese students, university students actually have the opportunities to be exchange students to other to universities elsewhere, basically overseas university, to receive this kind of education, to expose them early on to what the first class education means to them, right? These kind of measures actually the government has been doing, the university has been doing, try to raise quality. For your second question, basically, I mentioned about this kind of planning mechanism, right? You have this kind of 15-year kind of plan, then you have kind of like 5-year plan, right? These kind of plan basically try to identify the areas of priority, prioritize the area in which the government or the universities or research institutes are going to spend more money on, right? So these kind of mechanism, this kind of mobilization or the concentration of resources have its kind of limitations, right? You can do those things, try to introduce those kind of try to do the things other scientists or other countries have done, right? Then try to replicate that in China. But if you really want to achieve breakthrough, fundamental breakthrough, you really have to put more money into basic science, right? That's the areas I think the Chinese government really needs to improve in the next 15, 20 years. Otherwise, it is basically very difficult for China to still kind of try to imitate, try to copy foreign scientists and foreign inventors. If you take a look at some of the leading companies in China, including companies like Alibaba, like Baidu, like Tencent, from time to time they still try to do those kind of business model innovation, try to adapt the innovation elsewhere into the Chinese situation. Going forward, if China really wants to become innovation oriented nation and become a scientific power in the world, you really have to spend kind kind of money on things like basic science, etc. But right now, the percentage of China's size and the expenditure going into basic science is still about 5%. It's very, very low compared to other countries at a similar economic development level. So, right, so there is kind of room for China to improve in this particular area. So, thank you.